Hello, welcome to my channel, another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and I am going to do a July wrap-up and August TBR. I am filming in my backyard because my library is almost completely empty of books. They are all boxed up and put into the garage. The first book I read was an audio book, and it was The Book of Joan by Linda Yankovic. I have mentioned this in a previous tag video. This is a literary science fiction book set mostly on a space station after the Earth has had rather severe environmental calamities, and the people on the space station are losing their sexual organs. It is a retelling of a Joan of Arc-like story. I did enjoy it. I would recommend, if you like literary science fiction, that it's pretty good. The second book I read was Dracula by Bram Stoker. This is a reread for me. I read this book in high school, and then I listened to the audiobook about 12 years ago. I wanted to reread this book because I have an audiobook called Shadow Play by Joseph O'Connor, which is a historical literary novel, and it features the Bram Stoker as a character as he was working for a London theater and his interactions with a married couple. And I believe that we'll have the author's Joseph O'Connor's interpretations of events that creeped into the novel Dracula. So that is why I wanted to reread Dracula. The next book I started was Pulp Short Stories by Raymond Chadler. This is part of the Library of America edition. It is basically just a collection of his short stories he wrote. I read about 2 of them, and I put it aside. I am going to finish this because Raymond Chandler is on my Read Every Book by an Author challenge, but I needed to box up that book and get it ready for shipping when I move at the end of this month. Next book was an audiobook, and I have reviewed this. That was The Golden Cage by Camilla Lackberg. You can check out that video if you want a little more details. This is a Swedish crime novel about a housewife that gets revenge on her husband. Next was 3 Men in a Boat. This was a group read over with Mark at Book Times with Elvis. This was a very humorous book. I quite enjoyed it. It is Mark's favorite book. I don't think it'll make it onto my favorite book list, but it was an excellent read and humorous about 3 men traveling on the Thames on a boat with their dog. Next was Vernon Subutex 3 by Virginie Dupont. This is wrapping up a trilogy that I started about 12 weeks ago. No, about 15 weeks ago. And this is the story of a record store owner who becomes a homeless man and a bit of a guru. This book ended on a very surprise note for me. I do recommend this to anyone who wants to read books with, let's just say, non-mainstream characters. The next book I read was an audiobook. Now, some people may get purists on me and say it's not a book. This was part of the Great Courses series, which is essentially a college professor giving lectures on a subject. And this subject was thinking about religion and violence, and the professor was Jason C. Bivens. This covers a large and broad swath of religion and how it can lead to violence. The professor was pretty clear that he does not believe that religion is inherently violent. He believes that political and economic circumstances basically encourage religious people to interpret their religion in a way that can lead to violence. And not to spoil the whole course, but his idea was basically that you have to have better economic opportunities and empathy towards people of other religions. Next was the book Landslide, The Final Days of the Trump Presidency by Michael Wolff. This is a book of pure political pornography. It is just Michael Wolff trashing on Donald Trump. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. I don't think Michael Wolff invented any facts. I think he interpreted them rather to the disadvantage of Donald Trump. I can highly recommend this as just a trashy book on Trump. If you are a Trump supporter, obviously you're not going to want to read this book at all. My wife bought it as a Audible book for herself, and she talked about it so much that I just listened to it as well. The next book I read was He Died with His Eyes Open, and this is by Derek Raymond. This is the first of his Factory Quartet. Jim over at Books, Readings, and Stuff had mentioned that one of the later books, I believe it was the third book, was the most disturbing book that he had ever read. And after his little review, I put that book on my Amazon wish list, and I noticed that I had bought this Kindle version of He Died with His Eyes Open like 5 years ago, and it's been sitting on my Kindle ever since. So I just read it. It is the story of a detective who finds the body of a badly beaten middle-aged man, and it is the story of him basically seeking out who killed this man. I did like it a lot. I would not rate it super high, but definitely worth a look if you like crime fiction set in London. And that was all the books that I finished reading in July. I am behind my normal reading schedule. I set a goal for myself of 40,000 pages per year. That comes out to a little more than 3,300 pages a month, and I'm about 580 pages behind schedule just because of how busy I have been with work and moving. Going into August, I have started a number of books already. I have started Sanctuary by William Faulkner. This is a group read for Faulkner in August. It is quite a lively group on Voxer. There's still plenty of room to join. You have into the end of this week to read 8 chapters. I've already finished my 8 chapters, and we're discussing it on Voxer. Please do join us if you want to read a Faulkner novel. I am going to be reading The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury as a buddy read with David Wiley. Now, I started this and I read the first short story, and David Wiley is definitely joining me in a day or two, and we are going to read a short story per day. I'm sure there's room for people who want to join in on The Illustrated Man. And I have started reading The Man Who Lived Underground by Richard Wright. Of course, Richard Wright is most famously remembered for his great novel, Native Son. This is the novel that he wrote after Native Son, but did not publish. His heirs, I believe it's his daughter and his son, wanted the Library of America to come out with this novel, and they did publish it earlier this year. Now I'm only in about the first third. I have been enjoying it. I don't think it's going to be as great as a novel as Native Son, which of course is a very high standard to achieve. Anyway, that is what I read. And otherwise, books more that I'm going to read this month. I am going to read a book by a woman in translation. Roz over at Scally Dally in the Books mentioned that, and I decided, yeah, I should read one. I'm pretty sure I've narrowed it down to a couple by Human Acts by Han Kang. She is a North Korean author, and that's probably the one I'm going to select. For audio books, I'm probably going to read another Trump nonfiction that my wife bought. It's Only I Can Fix It. I don't remember the author of that, but as she's explained it to me, that this is a much more serious look at the Trump presidency without all the Michael Wolff trying to make light of the events and make it very humorous. I also do want to read that Shadow Play book by Joseph O'Connor. And that's probably going to be enough for me because after that I have to start packing up in earnest. Thank you, have a good evening, and good night.